right, boys and girls, this week we are going to jump into the exciting world of poetry. So throughout this week, I am going to refer to this poem that you see over here on this split screen, and it is titled, Sing to Me. I'm going to use this poem throughout the week, and then you will be applying what we talk about during these videos to a different poem. It is titled The Climb, and you have a copy of each of those in the daily folders for reading this week. So let's get started. Over here on this side of the screen, you see a chart that includes elements of poetry. So some of these might sound very familiar, and some maybe you have not heard of before. The first one we want to talk about is rhyme. I know this is a word that you've heard probably all the way back to like kinder and first grade. Words that end with the same sound. For example, pen, ten. These words rhyme with each other. We know that oftentimes in poetry, words at the end of the lines will sometimes rhyme with each other. The next element of poetry, rhythm, the musical quality or the beat. For example, we have this very familiar, very popular part of actually a lyric, also poetry. One little duck went swimming one day over the hill and far away. See how it has like that musical quality or almost like a beat to it? The next element of poetry is repetition. Repetition reminds me of the word to repeat, and that's exactly what this element of poetry is referring to. To repeat sounds, words, or phrases. So it might be something like, Bumblebee is small, Bumblebee is kind, Bumblebee is brave and loves purple flowers, Bumblebee is my favorite. The repetition here includes those words, bumblebee. It's being repeated over and over. As we move down, the next one we want to talk about is imagery. This is a very popular element of poetry, and this is a vivid description using the 5 senses. For example, you might describe the smell or the scent by saying something like, dinner smelled like grandma's lasagna. Maybe you're going to describe something that you're hearing. I heard the music pounding through the walls. Maybe the taste. The corn tasted like it was just picked from the field today. Maybe you're going to describe the way that something looks. The mountains looked like hills in the distance. Or maybe the touch. The cat's tongue was like sandpaper to my cheek. Again, just giving you that vivid description so that you're able to imagine what your poet or your writer is describing. The next one I know you've probably heard of is a simile. The word looks kind of like smile, but it's simile. Similes compare two things using the words like or as. He was as slow as a snail. We can almost imagine like a runner or somebody moving, and they are just so slow that we're even comparing them to a snail. The next one is a metaphor. This is also comparing two different things. However, you do not use the words like or as when you're describing a comparison using a metaphor. For example, you might read something like, the garden was a rainbow of colors. So it's comparing the garden to a rainbow, but it's just going to call it by something else. The garden was a rainbow of colors. The flowers were candy to my eyes. Next, we want to talk about this word, alliteration, repeating the beginning sounds. So 4 friends found free food. Again, we're hearing the letter F repeated, and again, that is referred to as alliteration. The next one we've talked about in writing before, this is an onomatopoeia. It's a sound that acts like a noise or an action. So, chirp, chirp, cheep went the birds. Again, these are onomatopoeias. They are words that kind of have a sound noise to them. Maybe zip, zap, zoom, boom, kaboom. These are all examples of onomatopoeias. Next, we want to talk about this word, personification. Personification is also used often in poetry, and it makes a non-human thing seem human. The cat and the dog read their book quietly. We know that cats and dogs do not read, but in this example, using personification, we're giving a non-human thing, like a cat or a dog, a human quality. There's also something else that I would like to talk about, and it is a stanza versus a line. So another element of poetry, when you look at this poem over here on the side, you can see it almost looks like a paragraph, like a chunk of text right here. I can see here's another chunk of text. These two lines right here are a chunk of text. These are called stanzas. So when we look at Sing to Me, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and finally down here, the last one, 7. So there are 7 stanzas in this poem. Now, there's something else that readers need to know, the difference between a line and a stanza. This is just one line of the poem. So if we were to count in this stanza, I see 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. If we wanted to count the number of lines in the entire poem, that would be 4, this would be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27. So there are 7 stanzas and there are 27 lines in this poem. So today we're just going to read through this poem very quickly and maybe point out a couple examples of these elements of poetry that our poet has included. So this is Sing to Me. The cool white keys stretched for miles. How would my hands pull and sort through the notes, blending them into music? I practiced and practiced all day, my fingers reaching for a melody that hung dangling like an apple just out of reach. So you can see, boys and girls, I've gone ahead and pulled up a Post-it note here, and I have elements of poetry written here. So now I've noticed that, yes, this poem has stanzas. We said it has 7. It also has lines. There are 27. Other elements of poetry, something that I just read in this second stanza, like an apple just out of reach. Here's an example of a simile. It's a comparison using the words like or as. Again, it's comparing that note that he's trying to play to something that's just out of reach. So like an apple just out of reach. I can't do this. I can't do this. The day ground on, notes leaping hopefully into the air. Now let's pause for a moment. There's something I just noticed. I can't do this. I can't do this. That reminds me of an example of repetition. To repeat the same sounds, words, or phrases. This is a phrase that's being repeated. So this is an example of repetition. And again, it was that phrase, I can't do this. Something else that I noticed here, the day ground on, notes leaping hopefully into the air, hovering briefly only to crush. An awkward jangle, a tangle of noise, before slowly fading away. So there's 2 things here in this stanza. The first one that you probably caught was the rhyme. We know that jangle and tangle rhyme with each other, but there's something else there that I've noticed, and it is personification. When a writer gives that like human quality to a non-human thing, he's talking about notes, right? Like in music class, we talk about music notes. That's what he's referring to here. Notes leaping hopefully into the air, hovering briefly only to crash. So music notes that are leaping into the air. We know music notes don't actually jump off the page and jump into the air. So this is a great example of personification. Let's continue reading. My mom found me, forehead on the keys. She asked, "Would you like some help?" It took months for my hands to do what I wanted. She sat down on the bench, her slender fingers plucking notes from the air. I can do this. I can do this. She sat with me every night that week, working my fingers until their efforts made the keys sing to me too. Now, I know, here's another example of personification, make the keys sing. They're talking about a piano. So here's another example of personification. Made the keys sing to me too. We know that we're talking about piano keys, and piano keys do not sing. So today, boys and girls, all we really focused on was not as much the meaning of this poem. That's what we'll talk about tomorrow. Today we're really focused on just these elements of poetry and which ones we saw or noted in this poem, Sing to Me. Today you're going into, sorry for that delay, today you're going to go into our Monday folder and you will see a copy of that poem, Sing to Me, that I just modeled in this video. But then you will also find this poem titled The Climb, and right underneath that, the elements of poetry. If you click to open this document, you will find that chart that I was just referring to, this one right here. And then you will open up this poem titled The Climb. You're going to read this poem on your own, and as you read, I want you thinking about the elements of poetry that we've discussed. And in this discussion board post, you are going to identify as many elements of poetry that you can that you noticed in this poem. If you have any questions, let me know.